The Office of Personnel Management is working on new guidance on locality pay. Remote work and the pandemic could make the agency rethink who gets paid what to work where. Jeff Pond's national co-chair of the Training and Development Optimization Council. He's former director of the Office of Personnel Management. Jeff, welcome. It's great to see you again. I quote Rob Shriver of OPM, who asked this question recently, I think rhetorically: what are we going to do now if we have large segments of the federal workforce that aren't coming into the office and that are working from around the country? I pose that question to you, not rhetorically. What does that look like? How does that impact the way the agency should think about locality pay?
Yeah, I think that's the right question to actually answer. The world has changed. It's not business as usual. We have telework and remote policies that were pre-pandemic in terms of trying to create flexibility for where you worked and how you worked. Now things have changed. Over 73% of the federal government works in some form of telework, and before the pandemic, it was only 3%. Most private sector and public sector companies have remote workers. So we're going to see a slow progression towards opening back up sites for work. But many of the questions that we have in government are really appropriate for this time, which is, such as Senator Langford talked about with the nominee for the director, questioned her on whether or not we have jobs that we can move to remote locations and have that as permanent type of situations. He also brought up the military spouses program, so we can promote military spouses working remotely for the government wherever they're stationed. So these are some of the great ideas that are coming out because of this situation, and I think OPM can take a leadership role in conducting that with agencies.
Is there a risk at nibbling around the edges on things like locality pay and maybe missing out on an opportunity to rethink the entire shape of the federal workforce, Jeff? Because as you described those issues there, they all sound like things that somebody, I'm picking on Congress here, could turn into individual elements that somebody should do something about, i.e. write legislation, when in reality they should probably all be thrown into a pot and everybody involved think about all of these things together all at once.
I think you're dead on right there, because what we do here in government, in the legislature and also in OPM, we do nibble around the edges. We talk about locality, we talk about GS pay and different types of things like that, but we don't couple them together like the rest of the world does. So when you think about this GS system, it talks about occupational codes and different types of steps and grades, and it really then does add locality. In the rest of the world, you look at sources like salary.com or PayScale or Indeed or ADP, Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have current salary data that is sensitive to occupations as well as where they're living. So why don't we actually become more sensitive to how you work where you work where you live, or live where you work, and have that type of debate as wholesale change? Because fact of the matter is, there's large amounts of our population, not just in the federal government, that have left the cities and have gone to places like suburbs, and like there's a mass exodus from California going to Texas, Austin, Texas, the tech workers. And you're going to see that permanency of workers being based out of those areas. And our federal systems aren't as sensitive to locality pay coupled with the different types of GS occupations. I'll give you a good example. A trucker in Chicago, high cost of living, COLAs are a lot in Chicago, but there's less of a demand for a truck worker there than there is in, for instance, in Texas and Tennessee, where there's large distribution hubs for Walmart and Federal Express and Amazon. So we haven't even taken into account of those different types of factors, whereas the rest of the world, including our contractors, have those factors at play. So it's a great opportunity for us to actually refresh the sensitivity, fidelity, and equity that we have in our merit systems.
We just have a little bit more than a minute left, Jeff, and the discussion that's going on all across government is interesting to me, too. FCW reports they had a not for attribution roundtable about this last week, and one of the participants, a federal executive, said, do I deserve to pay somebody who's living in Ohio the same salary I'd pay somebody who lives in D.C.? The agencies are thinking about this, too, as it pertains to their bottom lines, aren't they?
They are. And again, I think I'm going back to my former response, which is look at what's the market actually holds for that type of occupation, that type of person with that experience in that place. And you'll see the different types of market for a IT worker in cybersecurity in Chicago, in DC, in Florida, in places that we don't even have federal workers right now that are just remote. We need to start using that data, and the way in which we actually set up the salaries right now aren't as sensitive, time sensitive, for the last several decades. And we need to start updating that because, the employees, when they're negotiating different types of salary and even wages, they have these tools out there that show you what you're worth in different types of markets. And we need to pay attention to that as a employer of choice.
Jeff Pond, thanks very much as always.
Thanks for having me again, Francis.